I suck at jiu-jitsu? How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
The diabolical leader of the Vietnam
Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to the newest episode of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu Show. So today we are going to look at past mistakes. We are going to look at some of the biggest mistakes that I have made in my jiu-jitsu journey. I've been training jiu-jitsu for 16 years, and one of my students asked me to just listen to one of my episodes where I kind of talked about what life was like a little before jiu-jitsu, and then I really just dug into my 16-year jiu-jitsu journey. We just did that a couple weeks ago, and he had this follow-up question of, what was your biggest mistake in that journey? And to be honest, I have like a million mistakes that I've made in that journey. And I decided, instead of just going with one and just kind of answering it on a Q&A episode, I thought I would kind of dig into this, and I would kind of list what I see as my 5 biggest mistakes that I also see other people make. And to me, I think this is going to be really helpful for competitors and just people that are getting into jiu-jitsu. But I really would say that most of my mistakes were made at purple belt. And we will dig into why that is and why I think that kind of blue belt to purple belt space is when most people make their biggest mistakes in jiu-jitsu, and just how to be prepared, how to recover from those things, and just kind of how to take some assessment of yourself. And besides that, I will give you guys an update on how I did at Pans last week. Have a lot of different things I'll tell you guys about at the very end of the episode in the outro. But we will just kind of dig into the content today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode about the 5 biggest mistakes that I have ever made in my jiu-jitsu. All right, guys, we're going to keep this episode just like last week's, nice and negative. We're going to focus on the bad, and we are going to look at 5 big mistakes that I've made in my jiu-jitsu. Maybe I made these things multiple times, or maybe it's a very specific time in my jiu-jitsu journey that I'm going to tell you guys about. But we're going to look up how I try to avoid that mistake now, and and just some other thoughts on it. As always, it's the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show. We're just going to rant about my past problems, and I'll tell you guys about those. And I think the first one, and this is critical. So many people make this mistake in jiu-jitsu at every level. I remember a specific time at blue belt that I'm going to highlight, but I remember a million times that I've made this mistake myself, and we'll dig into that. But that is just having overconfidence in how enlightened you are in jiu-jitsu, how much knowledge you have in jiu-jitsu. When I was a blue belt, I remember being like 16, 17 years old, and I was starting to get pretty good, and I had a really good knowledge of the moves that I wanted to be better at, and I was working them a lot, and I was getting good at them. And I remember this thought, and it's just so funny to think back to 12 years ago in my, teenage brain, what I was thinking about in jiu-jitsu. I was like, this is probably as good as I'll ever be in jiu-jitsu. I'm just going to get bigger and stronger, so I'm just going to be able to add some strength and athleticism to my game. And yes, I did get bigger and stronger, and it's helpful in jiu-jitsu to be bigger and stronger, but my game is not what it was then. My game is very, very different now. And so to really think that I was intelligent there, that I knew what I was talking about there as a blue belt, is obviously not, it's ignorant. And people now know that. People now go, oh, there are so many really knowledgeable people. There are so many black belts, and you get to kind of test and see like, oh yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about compared to this black belt. But then this problem occurs, is there's always these points in jiu-jitsu where you go from like, in your knowledge, you go from like a plateau to just like you skyrocket. And when that happens, it's so easy to then say, it's finished. Finally, I know everything. I know jiu-jitsu. I watched this instructional and it enlightened me, and now I know jiu-jitsu. And I can't stress enough how bad of an idea that is. That is the enemy of getting good at jiu-jitsu, that idea right there, or progressing at jiu-jitsu, because you may already be, you may be very good, but it doesn't matter if your progression stops. The game evolves. Part of being a practitioner of the game, being current in the game, is understanding that evolution, is getting good with as the game gets better, or just the game changes. And so I see this so often in purple belts. They buy an instructional that really changes their perspective, and it is. I don't want to take away anything from that. It's an awesome experience, changes your jiu-jitsu. It's what you want to happen. The problem occurs to me, though, when then they go, okay, well, I know all this stuff that Danaher taught in the instructional, and I know everything that my coach has to say. I've been learning from my coach for 5 years now. I am now my coach plus Danaher. I am that good at jiu-jitsu. I am that knowledgeable. So if my coach ever disagrees with what I'm doing or what I'm thinking or what I'm saying, I'm like, well, Danaher said the fulcrum of the arm, and you didn't even say that. So really, who's smarter here? Who could be the guy here? Who's intelligent here? Do you see how dumb you sound, coach? And I see that happen, and I even know that happens, and I warn against this, but I know that happens with my content, that people will hear how I say something and then repeat it back and be like, look, now I'm smarter than you. And in jiu-jitsu, that's so dumb to do, because most of the time when it's somebody else's idea, when I'm watching a Danaher instructional, I could watch it meticulously and I could take notes meticulously, but you have to understand that what he's talking about, he understands in a way that you do not. Okay. So just repeating back a word, it doesn't change anything. So a perfect example of this is I've really, really, really been digging into weight distribution and connection, the hidden jiu-jitsu ideas from Henry Akins. And I've talked to you guys about it, gotten to train with Henry a couple times, and I've learned a lot. But the problem was, and I've still recognized this as a problem, most of my ability to explain what is going on when this weight distribution is happening, when this connection is happening, almost all of my ability to explain it, probably 100% of my ability to explain it, are words and catchphrases that Henry told me. That means I don't understand. I'm learning. That's how you learn. But I don't understand. If I can't say it back in a different way than it was explained to me, then I don't understand it. You think about something you know really well in jiu-jitsu, if you know anything really well in jiu-jitsu, but something that you know really, really well in jiu-jitsu, you probably have a sentence that you could use to explain it. And it's really, really good thing. And it helps, especially if you've taught this to other people. You find like, oh, there's this one phrase that really, really clicks. It really resonates with everybody. And then you start to go, you know what? That phrase also means this. And you start to make some connections. You start to actually grow your knowledge base of this move. And you find out some other small details and then some other kind of simpler things that make your move work better. And you become actually knowledgeable at that move. That way, if I came up to you and we were, even if you weren't a black belt, if you were a blue belt, a purple belt, and you were just super good at this move and I'm seeing you catch people in it, and it's something that I'm interested in, so I come up and like, hey, show me that. Show me what you do. If you repeat it to me the same way that whoever just taught it to you, and then I have a question, okay, well, what about this? You're not going to have a good answer. But if you did it the other way, if you really deeply knew whatever this topic is, if you really tried to understand it. The best way to do that is to get a lot of perspectives, is to really focus on it. But if you really tried to understand it, even me as a black belt, if I asked you a question as a blue belt, well, what do you do when guys do this? You may give me something and I just like, oh my gosh, this is huge. I love this. And it might be huge for me. It's a cool experience for you too. And it might even be something like, oh, wow, I like to think of that idea like this, and explain it to you that way. But just kind of what happens if there is this overconfidence in your knowledge. You'll go into that situation and you'll be like, oh yeah, the fulcrum. And then I'll go, hey, I don't know if you know this, but I didn't graduate college. I didn't go to college. I graduated high school. And that is the end of my learning that isn't in the school of hard knocks, right? That isn't jiu-jitsu. So I could not tell you even slightly what a fulcrum is. Can you explain that word so simply and make me understand what that is? Or is that just a word that you use to sound smarter than me, right? Because you can be smarter than me, but you're not going to be able to teach it to me. You're not going to be able to communicate with it to me, communicate with me about it. Oh my gosh, that was a hard one. That was a stretch. But we will just kind of finish this thought, this big mistake, on something that we kind of quote that Albert Einstein said. We talk about this on the podcast. I've actually, I think I had this quote up because I've been working on the Master Any Position in 6 weeks program, and this quote works really well, and it's that genius can simplify, right? Anybody can make something more complex and harder to understand, but a genius can make it easier to understand. And in the jiu-jitsu space, maybe it doesn't even have to be a genius. Just somebody who deeply understands can make it so simple. But yeah, that Henry Aiken's example now is me just knowing how to work something and how to not be great at something. Because I went from being great at the passing stuff that I liked to not being very good at this new stuff. But I really like the use of it and I really like the effectiveness of it. And so I want to master that, right? But the only way to master that is to realize that you are not a master of it. And, I consider myself, I could be totally wrong on this because there's not a thing we could measure, but I do consider myself one of the best learners of jiu-jitsu that I know. I really think that most of this podcast is just me sharing things that I've learned from other people. And so I've dedicated 9 months of my training specifically to this guard passing. And I still can't tell you like, oh yeah, I understand it. I can explain it to you now. And I'm learning it and I'm learning it and I'm learning it. But it would be so easy for me to make the mistake because I'm getting great success already. It would be so easy to make the mistake and go, now I understand it. Yeah, I'm good. Now I don't need to dig deeper. And I just see that. I did that early on. I did that a little even at purple belt. And then I got over that by brown belt. And I just can't tell you, like, I really think that's why I don't plateau in my jiu-jitsu, is because I'm always learning from different people, because I'm always cool with going, yeah, I don't know everything, Then you learn from so many different people and you go, man, I was Steve Harvey and I surveyed 100 people and 50 of them gave me one incredibly similar answer. Maybe that's incredibly important. And I think that's just a big contrast in how I looking at jiu-jitsu now and versus how I did early on and just how I see a lot of people do it. But let's go to mistake number 2. Mistake number 2 is listening to the wrong people. You guys are all doing it right now. You're listening to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. You don't even know me. What if I just made all that crap up? You guys need me to prove it. You ever YouTube Josh McKinney? There's a lot of bad stuff on there. A lot of rough stuff happening to your boy Josh McKinney. I don't know. Is he the right guy to be listening to? Well, anyway, a mistake that I remember making as I was growing up, just occasionally, I didn't do this bad. I know that I could have been way, way worse about this. But it was just kind of listening to the wrong people about jiu-jitsu or life advice or whatever, or, and I think that this was more common, listening to the right people maybe giving me advice that was out of their scope. And so, for instance, and I loved this. I thought this was a really good quote that I just heard, and it was about it was a Robert Drysdale thing. And he was talking about how you aren't respected in jiu-jitsu unless you can beat that person up, and it's so bizarre when you think about that. My buddy Chris Paynes always talks about how they have they have soccer, football as they call it in Europe, and he says, like, it would be so bizarre if the soccer players didn't respect the coach because the coach couldn't play soccer as well as them, or football for that matter, American football, or European football, or just any sport. Like, most of the time, the coach isn't as good as you. But in jiu-jitsu, for whatever reason, because you kind of have to prove yourself so much on the mat, it's weird. It can be very easy to just not respect maybe your coach's advice because he physically is not able to beat you up anymore, right? Or you respect somebody else's advice more just because maybe they're just a little more physical. Maybe their jiu-jitsu is not near as good, but they can beat you up worse. And you go, well, if he can beat me up, then I just need to listen to what he says. And it's like the first mistake was not listening to anybody. And then I think the second mistake really was just not vetting things. We talk about this all the time on the podcast. When you start a new anything, a new art, a new sport, a new anything, you're going to struggle because you don't know what you don't know. You don't even know what you should be working on yet. And so in jiu-jitsu, we're learning all kinds of different stuff. We're getting all kinds of different advice. And a lot of the advice, I would say most of the advice is incomplete, but then a good amount of the advice is just bad. It's just not very good advice. And so when we look at these mistakes that I made and I think some other people make, one of the best ways to kind of handle it, one of the best ways to kind of make sure that you don't make these mistakes is you vet your stuff. You try it, right? So if somebody says, oh, this is the best way to pass the guard, and then you try it, for a good amount of time and it's not helping and you're getting swept, then you go, okay, that's not the best way to pass the guard. And then on top of that, that's probably not one of the guys I should listen to about guard passing anymore. If he gives you bad guard playing advice, probably not the guy I should listen to about jiu-jitsu anymore, right? And so, when you look at, there's so many factors when you're looking at accepting advice that you're going to really implement into your life. And I just remember early on not knowing that, not realizing it was important who I listened to. So looking back now is one of the most positive influences in my life, no doubt, was my dad. And when I see one of it's so silly, but something that is kind of tied to my brand and my jiu-jitsu identity is that I am somebody that competes and has always competed and has never done steroids. Does that matter? No, who cares? But it's just become this part because it's something I talk about, right? I talk about it when I'm beat up physically and I'm not recovering like a lot of the athletes that I go against, and and I talk about it. But the reason is, yes, what I tell you guys, I don't want to value winning today so much that I sacrifice tomorrow. And so that's really that's my reasoning behind it. But the real reason that I have that reasoning is because I saw my dad age so much better than everybody else's dad. All my friends, their dads are sick and are unable to do anything and are unable to pick up their grandkids. And my dad and I train a 5-minute live hard round every Saturday still. I now have 25 pounds on him and I try to just beat him down, and we train still, but he's aged gracefully. He's aged in a good way. And when I see that, I go, okay, well, that is huge advice. Some of the other biggest positive influence, especially when you look at jiu-jitsu, but just in general, is my coach Kyle. Kyle was so big on learning and on learning from everybody. And I just didn't, it's weird when you've never really gotten out of your gym, you don't understand how different other gyms and other environments can be. And so in a lot of environments, it's like, no, the coach went to Brazil and he has this sacred knowledge that he will pass you down eventually. And it's set in stone, and it's not being edited and being built better over and over again. And so, yeah, just that difference with Kyle is like, Kyle could show me, let's say, North-South Kimura. Spoiler alert, that's Kyle's go-to. Always has been, always will be. You could look on YouTube, you would find it. I'm not telling you any secrets, but he's really good at it. I've learned it from him 10, 15 different classes over the years, but I haven't learned it from him in 8 years. And I bet you if this week when we go to train together, I'm like, hey, Kyle, will you show me some details on the North-South Kimura? I guarantee you he has better details and a better explanation of it. And I haven't even asked him about it. I just know that that's how he is with all of his jiu-jitsu. And that habit has, for me, especially for me when I was in my early 20s and no other 20-year-old was doing this, and they were still in that first phase of overconfidence in their knowledge, they're like, oh, I'm starting to get good. I'm starting to beat the coaches. I'm starting to beat the best guys. I must know everything now, right? And when I contrast that with the way that Kyle always was, and it was always about just getting a little better, getting a little better, getting a little better, however we could. It's just, it makes me realize how fortunate I am to have those mentors. Makes me realize how important it is for other people when you start to get good at something to be a good mentor, to adopt the white belt. But yeah, that was a mistake I made a little bit, and it was just early on, I think. And now I just don't make that mistake anymore. I have people that I trust now, and I just get good advice from them and implement it. And so this is more of a specific mistake. I've kind of given you some general, like, oh, I kind of did this way. This was a specific time in my life, and this was at Purple Belt. And this was when I started losing at Purple Belt. And I've talked about this. I talked about this a few episodes ago, where I was just struggling mentally. It was very frustrating to lose that much. And so I decided it was time to take a break. And that was my decision. It was just to take a break from competing and maybe just get better at jiu-jitsu. And honestly, looking back, that was such a big mistake. That was probably the slowest that my jiu-jitsu progression was since white belt. That period of time where I stopped competing. And it wasn't because competing just automatically makes you good at jiu-jitsu. It was just because I no longer had that goal where I was following a regimen and I was making sure that I had to be getting better. I gave myself, because I wasn't good enough, I gave myself the excuse to just like, you don't have to get better. You're not good enough. This is it. And again, you go back to that first thought of overconfidence in your knowledge. What happens when you're this genius blue belt and then you roll with freaking Nick Sanders from Revive Jiu-Jitsu? He's going to squash you. He's going to ruin your life. You guys should check out the Nick Sanders episodes that we've done. He's been on the show 3 times. But yeah, he's going to end your life. And it's going to totally wreck your worldview of jiu-jitsu. And so you'll then be faced with the thing we talk about all the time. You have the 2 options, which is you can make excuses or you can learn from it. You cannot do those 2 things at once, right? And so you can say, oh, well, Nick Sanders is big and he's just he just is a good competitor. So he just knew how to, and I was tired that day, and I ran out of liquid IV. So I haven't been as hydrated as normal. I had to drink a real Gatorade. My mouth was really sticky when I was breathing through my mouth. And so, that's the only reason it got me. And that's not the truth. The truth is his jiu-jitsu is better than yours. He is better at taking his body and doing jiu-jitsu to your body than you are at doing jiu-jitsu to his body. It is simple. There are no other facts. And you can say, this is how I'll get better, or you cannot. And so, when I look at that not competing, I gave myself an out from facing that over and over, right? I gave myself an out from going, hey, I know that I am not getting as good. And instead of going, that means something needs to change, for a little bit of time, maybe 9 months, I just didn't compete. And I said, I didn't think I was going to. It wasn't on for me. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And I don't know why, but one day I came back and I just decided, all right, I'm going to go back to a competition, and I won. I think what happened was, if I'm being totally honest, we can go back to mistake number 2. I got really, really, really lucky at that time and just ran into some of the best training partners for me at that time that I could have ever had. And it was like everybody just decided to go to college at SLU at the same time. That was a really good purple belt that was my weight, and moved to St. Louis and train at Watson Martial Arts. And so we just, for a while, just had this crazy good jiu-jitsu team. And it got me back into that mindset of, I could be a competitor. These guys are good competitors, and I'm getting reps against them, and we are all getting better now. And that motivation kind of put me back in a competition. But the reason I say that, that period of time was a huge mistake, those 9 months was a huge mistake. These were 9 months that, I am, as a new daddy and a school owner and a podcaster and all the other crap, and a competitor, I can't compete every single month anymore, right? At least for right now. But when I was 19, 18, I really could compete twice a month. And when I look at how many reps that would have been in over a year, basically, and how much that could have helped me be better when I already got my brown belt, and how much that could have made a difference in just my entire jiu-jitsu career, I see that as just a huge mistake I made. I didn't like losing because I had gotten so used to winning. So when it started happening, I couldn't handle it. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm going to take off. But back to that same idea of, what about that guy that you're going to be in the future? Don't you want to have helped him? I should have known that guy, this guy that I am now, was going to want to compete in jiu-jitsu again. I should have known that, and I should have kept preparing even when it didn't feel great. And even when I had to step back a little, and it couldn't be that I compete every single weekend. And I had to change it up and choose some things a little differently. But if you want to be a good competitor, listen to the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. And then besides that, get a bunch of reps competing. Those two things, I guarantee you will learn how to perform. It's something we focus on the show all the time. And the reason I know this is because I had so many struggles at brown and black belt when my skill really was there, but my performance anxiety was not allowing it to be. And, versus now where I don't suffer from that anymore. I really know how to. I do suffer from it, honestly, but I know how to do it. And I found out how to do it through just reps and reps and reps. And again, I really did those reps because I had a group of students that really wanted to compete. Sometimes you just surround yourself with the right people, and that will get you out of that setback. And I think on that note, let's go ahead and we will look at a commercial break, and we will get back to the last two mistakes And then, like I said, I'll make sure to give you guys an update at the end of this episode on pans and just a bunch of stuff that we have coming up. What's up, guys? Josh McKinney. Just wanted to interrupt this episode and tell you guys about something huge, something that we've been teasing on this show for about 3 years, and that is the release of the Trinity of Guard Passing. This is my newest instructional, and it drops the day after Easter on April 1st. On April Fool's Day, which is weird. But this instructional is built around this idea of chest over chest and just a few other concepts that really will make you understand what is actually happening when guard passing is happening. And so as you go through this instructional, you will not just kind of learn what we call the Trinity of Guard Passing, which is the knee weave, the Toreando pass, and the knee cut, just what I consider, like, for me, standing passing wise, my 3 essential guard passes. And you will learn some details on that, some entries on those that I guarantee you've never seen before, because these are things that I made up. But these things that I made up, they came from some really important concepts when it comes to passing the guard and pinning people, and just accomplishing that over and over consistently without taking a lot of risk. And that is what the Trinity of Guard Passing will do for you. You will absolutely understand guard passing so much better because it is so simple. You will be able to realize, oh, there are only 4 or 5 different things happening, but they're happening over and over and over again when I'm trying to pass somebody's guard and when I'm trying to pin them down. And that is only available on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show Pro. So the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show Pro is our new pro podcast, but also we've tied in a bunch of our instructionals. So Dominating Connections is on it. Mastering the Duck Guard is on it. There's 4 different seminars, some guard passing, some about pinning, some about just different things. A lot of question and answer and just so much content. And this is all available for only $20 a month. And that is what the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show Pro is. And we're just getting this started. So to celebrate it, we decided we had to finish the Trinity of Guard Passing. We had to make it exclusive. And so if you are interested in leveling up your guard passing, and I really mean leveling up your guard passing, this is, I really think, the best way you can do it. And so without further ado, we'll just go back to Josh in the episode. But don't forget, if you get the chance, go to simplifyingjujitsu.com or check the link in the description, and you guys can get your copy after April 1st of the Trinity of Guard Passing. And we're back, and we're doing what I think we all should be doing in jiu-jitsu right now. We are bashing Josh McKinney and looking at all the mistakes that I've made. So here are looking at 5 of the millions of mistakes that I've made. But here is another one. And again, this is more specific. And like I said, a lot of these I think you make at purple belt. Purple belt is like your jiu-jitsu kind of coming of age. I always feel like brown belt is kind of like diet black belt, right? Or it's it's like you're so close. You're almost your junior black belt, your probation black belt a lot of times at brown belt. But at purple belt, there's so much range. You could be beating black belts or you could be losing to white belts still. And both of those things are very normal in my opinion. And so when you see that is like one of the most diverse belts. So for a lot of people, it's one of the longest belts because you have to kind of go through that process. And that is, as I went through that process, it's why I made all these mistakes. But also, those mistakes are what caused me to go through the process, what made me who I am as a black belt today. And so, yes, I'm not. I just want to make sure to explain that I wouldn't change these things. I think that you look at like how learning is making a bunch of mistakes, but it's also learning from them. And so one of the big things that I think I made a mistake with at purple belt was just not knowing how to focus for my own jiu-jitsu. I told you guys how how Kyle's gym had just moved, and so I was responsible for a lot more of my training. My dad and I were responsible for a lot more of our training, and we still didn't know yet how to get good at jiu-jitsu. Our answer for how to get good at jiu-jitsu was show up at class, train consistently, get good advice from good guys. And that was the only way we knew how to get good. But then all of a sudden we're on our own and we didn't know how to get better. We had a crew with us too who also needed to get better. And so, all these things are kind of happening to me at the same time at Purple Belt. And this is when I kind of end up stepping away from competing. But when we start to get back to competing, the mindset's a little bit different. And the mindset is there is a way to do this. There is a way to do this without being on steroids. And there is a way to do this while staying in St. Louis. And we're going to find it. Or we'll just die. And because we're in the Midwest, what else is there to do but try to chase jiu-jitsu and die? And so when I think back to, when it really started to change for me as a competitor, my dad and I were talking and he was like, well, we need to get back to repetitive drilling. And I was like, I don't love repetitive drilling. I don't think it's good. And he's like, well, then we need to get back to positional sparring. And I talked to you guys about this conversation that I had during a private lesson years ago as a blue belt. And he brought that conversation up when we were purple belts. And he's like, yeah, remember, Jack said to just get reps in those positions. And so I started to just look at what positions am I losing from as a competitor? And I found focus again. And so that is the thing about practicing jiu-jitsu is you have to be so intentional if you care about being good. You have to focus and you have to decide what you want to focus on. It doesn't just fall into place. Greg McKeown, the author of Essentialism, he has this quote, and it is, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And when you look at that, for most of us, it's not a big deal. We go into our jiu-jitsu class, we don't prioritize, and the coach just shares what he wants to share. The problem is, as you get better, and especially at that late stage blue belt, early stage purple belt, you will start to go, okay, I've learned this before. I really, this isn't even something I play. This isn't part of my game. And you will probably run into this thought where you're like, man, my coach doesn't know what he's doing. The coach just isn't catering to you specifically. There's 50 people in the gym. There's 100 people. There's 200 people in the gym. A lot of times that class is being taught kind of to the lowest common denominator, right? Who knows the least? Let's share this with them. And so your life gets prioritized for you. Your jiu-jitsu training gets prioritized for you. Well, this position is important. Coach, I don't play closed guard. I'm 5'3" and 300 pounds. I'm not good at close guard. Can I please work half guard? Can I please work something else, right? You need a focus. But if you just go in wanting to work close guard because that's what someone told you that you have to prioritize, especially when you start to get better. Early on, probably just best. You don't know what you don't know. Just show up and just keep your mouth shut and just learn, right? But as you grow, as you get better, you will start to run into this problem where you have to go, if I want to continue growing, I have to find now what I don't know, right? And it's a lot harder because I know a lot of stuff now. And so, it might look different for a lot of people, but the core concept is, to me, it's going to be just being intentional in your jiu-jitsu training. We talk about the end goal method of training. First episode, 99th episode of the show. Both of those will just tell you, hey, focus on something. Be intentional. It makes a huge difference. If you try what it tells you, it's crazy the difference that it will make for you. And so now let's look at the last mistake that I made. And I don't think I'll stay too long on this one because I think it does just make sense. But we'll see. I might stay too long on it. I often do that. So mistake number 5 is just inconsistency in general. And I think that was something I struggled with so early on. was not following through. A lot of and this is not just as a coach. This was as an athlete. This was as a jiu-jitsu school owner. This is even as a podcaster, somebody who creates content. Something early on in a lot of those things, and even till lately, I've just gotten a lot better at it. But early on, I was very inconsistent. We would have an idea, we would work really hard on it, and then we would run into a problem with it. And so, and then we would stop on that idea, right? And so we just kind of ran out of, we just weren't really consistent. But then there were certain things that we were consistent on. For instance, there were like 3 nights a week for our jiu-jitsu training where we would only positional spar. And we would positional spar one thing for like 2 or 3 months over and over. And then we would do some live rounds to finish, but we would mainly just over and over and over positional spar in those classes. And then I would do other training. But the reason that worked is because we had built a system around this training method. And the system was, hey, at this time in my garage where we have full control of the training, we have control of the music, we have control of everything, we will show up and we will train for this amount of time, and we will train in this way. And so all the decision-making was done for us except for what position we were going to work. The positions that we were going to work is pretty easy because we were always talking about when we were going to switch and what it was going to be next. But we were really focused on getting good at the top and the bottom of, whatever we were working at that time. And when I look at that, I that makes so much sense now looking back. As to why I wasn't able to be consistent. And it was because so often with, for instance, content creation, I would find a course or a YouTube video teaching me how to do something, and I would put in 100% effort for weeks and weeks and weeks to get it to work. And then, maybe it would even work a little bit. Maybe the video would even get a few views, or the course would sell a little bit. But then I would run into this problem where the only way I knew how to get that few amount of views or those few things is to put in a ton of work and work really hard on it and make all these decisions. And it's very hard to just like in jiu-jitsu, it's very hard to just go live. It's very hard to just go hard when you're doing content creation, when you're doing something like that. It's easiest when you create a system around it. When you say, okay, well, a podcast is something that I could just say right into my phone in my office, right? And that was my system for a long time on this podcast. And then the system got tweaked and it grew, but it wasn't just, okay, I'm going to batch 10 podcasts, because I would think I would do that, right? I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to do 10 podcasts a week, and then I'll have them all done, and I won't even have to think about the podcast. But then I would run into a problem, and it was then I would run into 10 weeks later this position where I would not be used to doing podcasts. I wouldn't have time allotted to do podcasts, but I would need to come up with 10 new podcasts. And so now, kind of doing it, and the system's different, but just having a system built around having guests scheduled and having solo episodes done and scheduled and planned. And that's just made such a difference. But that's where that inconsistency I really think came from in most of that stuff that I did, was I just didn't know how to build a system around a habit or something that I wanted to accomplish or get good at. And seeing now how to do that and how important that is for jiu-jitsu progression, for progression in life, I realized that was a mistake that I made young. I was good at working hard, but the hard work wasn't always into the right things, and it wasn't always setting me up for success later on in life. And so with your jiu-jitsu training, if you're trying to get good and you're not being consistent in it, and you're falling off, and you're, I'm coming in, I'm going to make 7 days a week, and then you do that for 2 months, and then you stop training for 6 months. Not worth it. Not worth it. It would be, if you really do the math and you think about just the importance of staying consistent and how hard it is to get back into jiu-jitsu. If you do the math, you could have trained like 1 day a week. You didn't have to train so much, man. And you wouldn't get hurt and you wouldn't burn out. Or maybe you make 2, but you don't put that immense pressure on yourself. You build a system. And the cool thing about systems, and this like that trinity of guard passing, I'm telling you, this is really the guard passing system for my gym. For me, and just the guard passing system that I teach when I do a private lesson, when I teach a seminar, this is what I understand guard passing to be. But I also told you guys at a point in this episode that I'm trying to learn a brand new guard passing system just so I can compare it and combine it and tweak it and understand it, right? And so, when it comes to getting good at jiu-jitsu, I think that one, it's easy to just want to run and go, oh yeah, well I have the right stuff. I'm just going to go as hard as I can and I'm just going to push it really hard. You need to be consistent. You need to be able to do it for a very long time if you want to really get good. And when you really think about it, the journey is truly the best part. I don't know what the next 16 years will be for me in jiu-jitsu, but I know what the last 16 years have been. And it's awesome that they've led me to where I am. But even if they didn't, they were just so much fun. They were just so awesome. And, I'm very blessed to have gotten to experience them. And so, that's all I have for you on the content of this episode. I'll have a little longer outro. That's kind of my new format, I think, where we talk about the personal stuff a little bit later in the episode. Obviously, this whole episode was personal, but we just talk about that a little bit later. So let's turn it over to Josh one more time for our outro. Hey guys, this is Josh McKinney. Thanks for listening to this one. Like I told you guys, there's still a little bit of time left in this episode. I just wanted to kind of do a little recap of PANS for you guys, talk a little bit about how that went, and then just kind of give you guys some updates. We have some really cool opportunities for you to check out some new collabs that the show is going to be doing soon, and have a match announcement coming up soon, and a really cool seminar too. But first, how PANS went and competed at Master 1 medium heavyweight, still on the road to middle. We're still getting there. And went 1-1, had a good first match, and felt good until I didn't feel good in the second match. Felt great, honestly, and just fought a really tough guy. A guy that had beaten me before. It was I knew that was going to be probably one of the matches of the day for me, and so it was, and that was how that one went, man. It was a really fun one. I think it's just time to keep competing. Just keep, as I told you guys, that's the answer. It's always the answer, Definitely going to make some tweaks in what my training has been lately. I'm still working on that, and I feel like I really had it dialed in last year before having a son, before all the other stuff, and so it's just a matter of getting it dialed back in and making sure that we have everything that we need, and then also asking the right questions and getting the right advice, finding the right people. And so that's the answer is always the same. But then also some other things that we have going on. So this is something we did last year, but I didn't get to mention it to you guys a lot. I am going to mention this to you guys a lot. On August 17th, there is going to be a seminar I'm going to teach at Watson Martial Arts, and this is going to be for Mission 111, which I did a similar thing. I did the same thing last year, and it just went so well. And so we make this really, really affordable because Mission 111 is a nonprofit. I make absolutely nothing from it. This is my mom's nonprofit. She has run it also without pay for like a really long time, 12 years now. A really long time. And they do a lot of mission work in Haiti and the Philippines. And so this seminar, if you guys can make it out to St. Louis, if you've always wanted to come hang out with me, maybe get a round in with me, fight to the death a little bit, August 17th would be the day to do it. Like I said, the cost of the seminar itself is so cheap. It's literally the cheapest place you can learn from me. Just to encourage that, like, hey, come in, hear the story, and maybe if you wanted to donate, you could. But yeah, we also, like I said, I have a big match announcement, hopefully coming soon, and we're doing some big collaborations coming up. One that is going to wake you guys up in the morning, and it's going to be pretty darn cool. I think it's going to be the coolest thing that we've done for the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, in my opinion, at least if you're me. And then besides that, I just wanted to make sure to throw a little note in at the end. I met so many different listeners at Pans and then in Memphis a couple weeks before. And that is just one, it's still very shocking to me that people would want to take a picture and that people are excited to talk to me. But it is also one of those things that I see like, man, I love that, that people are getting help from this show. I love that people listen to my opinion. It's bizarre to me that they do, but I love that. But also, I talk to different people that like maybe won or lost their division, and it just really reminded me how easy, and especially going over these last 3 weeks where I've done a lot of kind of personal journey stuff where I just talked about my own journey. It just reminds me how much of jiu-jitsu or anything, getting good at anything is kind of suffering, you know, and in jiu-jitsu, it's really common. You know, if you want to be a good competitor, you have to lose. You know, very, 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 very few people, if anybody, get to just go be a good competitor without losing, and without experiencing loss and big loss and frustrating loss and discouragement and injury and all kinds of things. If you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, if you want to learn self-defense with jiu-jitsu, you are going to have to suffer. You are going to have to eat it. You're going to have to be discouraged. And there's two notes on that. One, I think, is that sometimes you just got to sit in it. I told you guys there was this point I lost motivation of competing, and I took time off, and I look at that as a mistake. And there have been times I've lost motivation in competing. I've lost motivation in content creation. There have been times, don't tell any of my students this, that I've lost motivation as a coach and been like, man, I just don't know if I have the energy for this. You know, I just don't know if I can do this. And the truth is, a lot of times ignoring that, because it wasn't the doing that I should have focused on there, right? It was I know in the future I want to have this. I know these are the people that I want to be around in the future, you know? And shifting that perspective, it made a really big difference, right? And just going, sometimes I'm not going to feel it, but if I got to think about future Josh, you got to think about future whatever your name is. And when you think about that, you go, sometimes it's okay, because this discouragement, yes, I'm dealing with it right now. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it's frustrating. But if I just keep going and I just stay consistent, one day in the future, I'm not only not going to deal with this discouragement anymore, I'm going to be good. But also it's going to become something that I can help other people with. And so that is a big thing. The other thing, is just this thought, like when it comes to being discouraged, when it comes to being down in your grappling, just these two words of be strong. And I think the reason that's on my mind is I was reading, I don't ever tell you guys Bible stuff. If this offends you, you should probably turn it off right now. But if I was reading Joshua recently, and there's just a lot of points in that where Joshua is told by God to be strong and courageous, And I remember there was this time I was reading that, and it just kind of had this thought of like, wow, that is something. When you have to be something, that's a practice, right? You practice being strong, and then one day you are. But just like you practice jiu-jitsu, you don't practice being good at jiu-jitsu, you suck. you practice one rep. Oh, I try one knee cut. It was not successful. Whatever. Oh, I hit one knee cut. That's one, right? When you're in a situation and you got to toughen up. You've got to be strong. If you just try it and you fail, you did get a little better at being strong, And that is, if you're struggling with competition anxiety and you go, okay, I just have competition anxiety. And each time you go in, you say, I have competition anxiety. I'm going to do my best to listen to everything they say on the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. And when you do that, what happens is you get reps against your competition anxiety. It's still there. It still exists. But now you know how to beat it. You know how to be strong. And so, if you're dealing with anything now, I don't know why that was at the end of my notes. I don't even know. I guess that was a chat GPT thing. I don't know why we're signing off with a motivational message about discouragement in jiu-jitsu. But we are. And that was just in my notes. And so I thought I would share it and give you guys that thought on it's okay to be discouraged. It's okay to suck. Just keep getting reps, man. Get reps being strong. It will make you better at being strong. Get reps at whatever you're trying to get good at, and it will make you better at it. And so even if those reps don't look very good, even if they're failure, that focus, that consistency, it adds up. And if there's one thing I could tell myself, my past self, it is that, the more that you're willing to take those losses and the more that you're willing to just learn from them and eat them and get better, you will get better. But when you let it make you quit, that's the only thing that kills your progression, right? Not getting those reps. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you liked it. Hope you liked a little format difference a little bit. And I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.